I prepared this critical synthesis for my comprehensive exam. It is a critical synthesis on the role that identity and self-advocacy play on Latino male adolescents' career readiness. The portfolio for the comprehensive exam includes the following documents: this critical synthesis, in addition to a publishable manuscript, which is a meta-synthesis of studies on Latino students' linguistic and ethnic identity. It also includes an annotated syllabus, my CV, and a doctoral fellowship. As context for this synthesis, I offer what I consider to be my professional soul, and that is a quote from Desjardins: "We are one, after all, you and I, together we suffer, together exist, and forever will recreate one another." Equally important is the context of my professional goal, which is to increase the recruitment and retention of minority populations in higher education, especially in teacher preparation programs. So for this, my three specific goals are: one, teacher preparation in the area of bilingual multicultural education, both in dual language or bilingual settings and mainstream classrooms. Two, research on topics that support our understanding of approaches that help minority students succeed and persevere academically. And three, the implementation of programs that better serve minority populations, especially emerging bilinguals, which could be defined as students who speak a language other than standard English at home. So within my second professional specific goal, that of creating research to support our understanding of what affects bilingual learners' schooling, is this critical synthesis and future research on the role that identity and self-advocacy play on career readiness, where career readiness constitutes a self-managed life in the spirit of Paulo Freire, and it is manifested in two concrete life events: high school graduation and transition into a 2 or 4 year career preparation program. Additionally, this synthesis focuses on male adolescents and not other gender identities, because research shows that this is the subgroup that has had the lowest graduation rates within the past few decades. 65% graduating from high school nationwide, while the white counterpart is at 80%, and in Connecticut specifically is at 52%, where the white adolescent rate is 80%. Additionally, there's other indicators. For instance, there's research stating that they are less likely to participate in school activities and assignments, and also because some variables are considered gender specific. For example, help seeking, which is in this synthesis part of self-advocacy, differs greatly between different genders. So this critical synthesis includes a theoretical framework and a synthesis of relevant literature that are intertwined with the critical concepts of identity and self-advocacy. The theoretical framework also includes the paradigm or worldview, and for this synthesis, the paradigm is both experiential and systems thinking. Experiential, as we will see later, it's fundamental for the appreciation of the definition we're using for identity and self-advocacy. And systems thinking is also a critical prism through which all the elements affecting or reshaping identity and self-advocacy are inter- and intra-connected within systems and subsystems. So paradigm, critical concepts, and literature, the sum of this creates this critical synthesis. In regards to our paradigm, experiential in this synthesis refers to the opposite of ontological. Ontological being understandings of the essence. Experiential leads us to a definition of identity and self-advocacy as understandings through perspectives and recognitions, both by the participants and the researcher. And systems thinking as paradigm implies that we're seeing everything as part of a system and subsystems as physical and abstract, and from which we cannot escape or deny. It's the DNA of living organisms. And this is important in connection to this critical synthesis analysis, as we will see later. Our two critical concepts are identity and self-advocacy. With identity, we are referring not to the ipse, the positive essence of things, or not even the doxa, which is, according to Bourdieu, the own recognitions. Rather, we're talking about recognitions and perceptions of the self and how, using Norton's definition, how a person understands its relationship to the world, how that relationship is constructed across time and space, and how the person understands possibilities for the future. In regards to self-advocacy, we define it as the understanding of one's rights and the ability to articulate one's needs and make informed decisions about the supports necessary to meet those needs. This places self-advocacy as also a recognition of possibilities and a shaper of identity for future self-advocacy behavior. This slide shows a diagram that pretends to bring everything together, the paradigm and the critical concepts of identity and self-advocacy. Here we see two subsystems, one where the fund is identity and together or interconnected with a subsystem where the fund is self-advocacy. Both have their inflow, and in this case I'm using an example that I quote in the critical synthesis of a Filipino student who speaks Tagalog in class and whose experiences shape his identity through feedback loops, reinforcing either an image of him as a good student or as a guesser and an English learner from a deficit perspective, and how this can have an impact into his self-advocacy, which in turn influences or reshapes his identity as an identity for self-advocacy and agency. And this also touches upon one of Frank Fanon's concepts in regards to inferiority. He refers to it as the internalization, or rather epidermalization, of inferiority. Because he states that man is what brings society into being in the same way that society brings man into being. And it is in this recognition that man has the option of becoming an agent, and through the behavior he liberates himself, earning an identity as a free man. So because both Freire and Fanon, both critical authors in this synthesis, claim that there are layers of recognition in identities, this synthesis focuses on the idea that domination is not simply the obvious class oppression, but that it is subtle, and that it creates a culture of silence as language of critique is eliminated. Subsequently, it focuses as well on one of Freire's most empowering ideas in connection to identity and self-advocacy in education, an idea that other authors like Gendara shares, and that is that power is not limited to the oppressor, and that the oppressed have power to become agents. And it is through moments of what Holland calls improvisation, and also what Fanon refers to as agency in behavior, that the oppressed can react and or resist and become agents toward liberation or toward perpetuating the oppression. So this synthesis, and later my research, addresses these recognitions and experiences as students' identity builders and as fundamental in students' capacity to self-advocate. So now moving on into the relevant literature on this topic, we could say that because the gap in career readiness between populations has existed for decades, the phenomenon has led many scholars to investigate what could its causes be and what might be the factors that could ameliorate it. I found over 100 studies that target this issue, and in general, I could identify two trends. One of what I'm calling deficit approach and another one of an equity approach, where the deficit approach per se blamed the students, their families, or neighborhood for their lack of schooling performance. And then there were many other more recent studies that bring up an equity approach where they state how the school and society have been perpetuating the low performance of Latino male adolescents. And some also investigate the reasons why this could be. I am using a systems thinking as perspective to resolve this apparent dichotomy between school's societal agency versus the personal agency, or the school societal blame or fault versus the personal blame or fault. And it is also within this apparent dichotomy where identity research becomes fundamental. And that is because identity and self-advocacy are shaped by all the actors, but also can shape or affect all actors. Additionally, as seen in research, apparently, identity and self-advocacy can serve both as catalysts or as saboteurs of means for success that are placed within all actors. So, for example, while an education system might finally recognize the need to foster a sense of belonging in the school as a means to promote graduation rates and implement a mentorship program or something similar, some minority students, according to research, still choose not to participate because they don't see themselves as the type of student that would use a mentor, for example, which denotes a specific identity indicator. Therefore, to better understand why only half of Latino male adolescents are career ready, we need to deepen our understanding on the role that identity and self-advocacy play in career readiness. These 6 qualitative studies are the studies that I chose to describe as part of my literature review in connection to identity. And the reason why I selected these 6 is because I used a specific criteria. First, I selected only studies that included students' perspectives, quotes, comments, experiences, perceptions, and this because it matches the definition of identity that I'm using and my paradigm of experiential. I also selected only studies that had as a sample Latino students whose families still speak or use Spanish at home. That was the choice I had for defining Latino, since it could be extremely broad, the term. Finally, I selected researches that only included students that were school age, meaning K through 12. So, Frank Fanon says that to speak a language is to appropriate its world and culture. And as I determined the study of identity in this research, I focus on linguistic and ethnic identity, since the studies actually had the same focus. And as I organized the quotes and perceptions of students in relation to their identity, there were 3 themes that became evident. First of all, there was a clear sense of acceptance and resistance toward English as a language of power. There were quotes like, you have to learn English to be an American. It's important in order to be successful or to be a good student. I know others who would be gifted if they spoke English well. But then there were also manifestations of resistance toward English as a language of power, and evident resistance toward having to take a test that's hard to pass and that inevitably places them at a classification, labeling them as else and from a deficit perspective, and not being able to partake of electives at school. There was a second prevailing theme of Spanish as a lesser language, but also one that is important for family and identity. Finally, there was a critical theme where bilingualism appears to be both a source of enrichment, but also a source of discrimination. Some students in dual language programs and in the gifted program and two of the new arrivals into the country refer to being bilinguals as an advantage, something that they love or like. However, Latino students outside of the dual language or gifted community also speak of bilingualism as a source of adversity and discrimination, where there's a sense of shame and deficiency associated with being bilingual. In regards to the concept of self-advocacy, I found no research linking directly self-advocacy and Latino male adolescents' performance in school, career readiness. However, there were abundant studies that connect self-advocacy with special education. In particular, most studies address the efficiency of intervention and the positive impact that this has in students' schooling. Because of the similarities of all these studies, I chose one by Dryden from 2017 that measures the effectiveness of impact, a intervention program that teaches self-advocacy to high school special education students. And this specific study uses a sample of Latino high school students among other population. It is a quasi-experimental quantitative study that seeks to answer the question if there were positive outcomes that came from training students in self-advocacy, and if these positive outcomes prevail after 1 year. And while their descriptive statistics does not or do not address the role of self-advocacy on Latino male students, its sample does include this population, and it measures the growth of self-advocacy in this population, concluding that the training makes a difference and that their schooling quality improves. In addition to Dryden's study, I included one where the authors investigate help seeking in populations, and they disaggregate the data not only by ethnic group, they also do it by language group and by gender. And that's why I included it, because it gave me an appreciation of the differences between not only Latinos in general, but Latinos who still use Spanish at home and Latinos who identify themselves as males. Additionally, I chose it because it addresses help seeking, which is the closest I found in regards to self-advocacy, since our definition of self-advocacy includes the help-seeking ability. This is a quantitative study, and as mentioned, it investigates Latino high school students' reluctance to seek help. And it proposes that adolescent help-seeking is a mediating link between their minority condition and their life changes. The means difference showed that Latinos were the least open to seeking help and reported the least desire for more academic support. Furthermore, through regression analysis, the authors concluded that the two predictors that affected the tendency to withdraw from sources of support were both gender and academic performance, thus making the male Latino Spanish speakers the least prone to seek for help. This brings us to our conclusion that there's a need for research that looks at underlying assumptions and societal discourses affecting this population's identity and their capacity to advocate for themselves in relation to career readiness. Furthermore, a systems thinking approach has the potential to be a paradigm from where dominant positions and voices are neutralized to give rise to voiceless agents and to observations of factors affecting the oppressed, where everyone is part of the same system. Therefore, the need for future research on this topic, where the creation of narratives of potentially two samples, one of students who are career ready and another of those who are not, seeks to answer the questions, first, what are the identity and self-advocacy traits that are identifiable and reinforced in participants' narratives? And two, what is different between the narratives of Latino male students who are career ready and those who are not? Thank you very much for your time.